Welcome to Journey to Daybreak. I'm Rita Golden. Have you ever had something happen to you which caused great grief, and later it turned out to be a blessing? Genesis 50:20 shows what God can do with something meant to harm you. He can not only protect you in it, but he can also promote you because of it. The exact thing Joseph's brothers had meant to cause him harm was the exact thing God used to promote him to his destiny. Tony Evans illustrates. He takes the word meant. The word meant can be defined as the past participle of to mean, which is to intend for a particular purpose and destination. You've probably heard someone say something like, "They probably shouldn't have said or done something that lacked tact, but someone else tried to cover it up with, they meant well." What they were saying is that even though what the person said or did created a negative reality, that was not their intention. They hadn't meant to cause harm. But that was not the case with Joseph's brothers when they stripped him of his coat and dumped him in a pit. Nor was that the case when they greedily plucked him from the pit and sold him for a profit to slave traders headed to a foreign land. Joseph's brothers meant anything but well. They meant to cause him harm. They meant to ruin his life. They meant to dethrone him from position of importance he had come to believe he would one day hold. They meant bad. Actually, they meant evil. But God, those two words are two powerful words. When you come across "but God" in Scripture, pay attention. What comes next will usually change the entire situation, especially if meant is added after them. I quote from Genesis 50:20. "As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." Joseph is a prime example of forgiveness, humility, and love, and shows the relevance of attitude in relation to prayer and action. The following is by Alfred Tennyson, a poem. Prayer. Pray for my soul. More things are brought by prayer than the world dreams of. Wherefore, let thy voice rise like a fountain for me, night and day. For what are men better than sheep or goats that nourish a blind life within the brain? If knowing God, they lift not hands of prayer, both for themselves and those who call them friends? For so the whole round earth is every way bound by gold chains about the feet of God. And now here is the Reverend Dr. Martha Toney to discuss for you further on the relationship of attitude and destiny. Dr. Toney.
Greetings, this is Dr. Martha Toney. As Rita mentioned, we want to talk today about attitude and destiny. Have you ever had something so painful to happen to you that this one incident changed your life forever? Recently, I actually listened to a story from someone who had experienced something a little like Joseph. According to this account, the person had been sexually assaulted by her father and thrown literally under a house in a pit, and told that if she told her mother about this, the father would end up killing the mother, and she was threatened. This event changed this person's life forever. It changed her own self-worth and caused an entire life of bad choices and a chain of events that ended in a perfectly intelligent young lady to endure hardships that were indescribable and also prevented her from ever living out her destiny. She never really overcame the life that she had endured as a young girl. And in the final days of her life, she wept over that awful experience. It's just hard to imagine being able to forgive such a life-changing circumstance. Yet, in Joseph's case, recorded in Genesis chapters 37 through 50, we have the story of a young teenage boy, Joseph, who not only overcame such cruel treatment to become one of the figures in Scripture who is a type of Christ, the Redeemer, one whose character was so upright that Joseph represents what it means to have a correct attitude in the times we are going through pain and suffering at the hands of evil people and evil conditions. So let's just very quickly summarize briefly the story of this remarkable man, Joseph. In the Old Testament, Joseph was the son of the patriarch Jacob and his wife Rachel. Joseph was Jacob's favorite son. We all know the story of Joseph's robe of many colors. His brothers were envious of their father's love for Joseph. So one day they seized him and threw him in a pit, and he was eventually sold and taken to Egypt, where he later gained favor in very high places because of his ability to interpret dreams. And so Joseph was promoted to management by Pharaoh, and because of his abilities and gifts, he later helped save Egypt to withstand a horrible famine. That same famine drove Joseph's brothers to Egypt, where they hoped to find food for survival. They bowed down to Joseph, not knowing who he was, the very brother that they had cruelly sold into slavery. Later, through mercy, grace, and forgiveness, Joseph reconciled with his brothers, and eventually Joseph's own house and family was saved from this deadly famine. And in our scripture today, Genesis chapter 50, we have one of the most beautiful scenes and examples of forgiveness in all of Scripture. Listen to Genesis chapter 50 as the brothers approached Joseph for forgiveness. So they approached Joseph, saying, "Your father gave this instruction before he died. Say to Joseph, I beg you forgive the crime of your brothers and the wrong they did in harming you." And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Then his brothers also wept, fell down before him, and said, "We are your slaves." But Joseph said to them, "Do not be afraid. Am I in the place of God? Even though you intended to do harm to me, God intended it for good, in order to preserve a numerous people, as he is doing today. So have no fear. I myself will provide for you and your little ones." In this way he reassured them, speaking kindly to them. Now there is one sentence in this story that summarizes why Joseph was able to turn his cruel event into a creative event. And that is this one sentence and question: am I in the place of God? That sentence expresses an attitude of creative suffering that sees possibilities in the most horrible of circumstances. This sentence will make the difference whether one's life will end in bitterness of despair or in a testimony of triumph. Am I in the place of God says so much about the character of Joseph. The character traits of Joseph were shadows of the Redeemer character of Jesus. And I'll just list a few traits that you'll recognize that are the same traits of Christ. Taking up the initiative to meet the needs of others. Joy in the middle of suffering. Peace in surrendering to God's wisdom and about how to turn harm into good. Patience and understanding that God's timing always is best and worth the wait. Kindness to those who hurt and disappoint us. Gentleness, a calmness in the face of evil. Forgiving because God has forgiven us. Humility, as Joseph wept at seeing the brothers he loved so much. Dependability. He had remained the same person no matter what harm was thrown his way. Responsibility, in that he was made governor and manager because he was trustworthy. Generous even to those who had degraded him. Encouragement in telling his brothers not to be afraid. Wisdom in seeing how his brothers would react to him. Compassion to those who hurt him. And we could go on and on about the character of Joseph. So let me just ask you this question. How would you respond to a friend or family member who treated you the way Joseph's family treated him? What if a boss believed a lie about you that someone else told him? What if your own daughter told a lie about you? Or what of the story of the young girl being put in the pit? What if that had happened to you? Would you be able to forgive? I'm asking myself this too. And not only forgive, but actually bless those that hurt you? I'm asking, can we do this? It's really not easy. I see myself in this picture. I was the youngest and the only girl of 6 children, and my parents were so happy to see a little girl that they found themselves having spoiled me, and I enjoyed being spoiled. It was innocent, but later it created an estrangement in my own family as I was truly seen figuratively as a little girl with a coat of many colors. So believe me, sometimes I speak about which I myself have experienced or am experiencing. So how did God use Joseph's story? Well, here are a few ways. He prepared a leader for the future that ended up saving a nation, Israel. It taught Joseph how to serve others. It trained him to be faithful. He learned patience. He saved many lives. He experienced God's favor and not just his earthly father's favor. And it placed him in a strategic place of leadership. But here's the big lesson. Joseph learned to regard suffering not as an unwelcomed occurrence, but rather as a sign that God is at work in our own lives. So instead of letting pain kill Joseph, Joseph actually used this pain as a stepping stone to his destiny. And that's what I want to share with you today. It's hard, but God really can use pain as a stepping stone to our destiny. It can either make us bitter. These things that happen to us can make us bitter, or they can make us better. They can make us bitter, or they can make us better. Ecclesiastes chapter 7 verse 3 says, "Sorrow is better than laughter, for bad the sadness of the countenance, the heart is made better." Wisdom from Oswald Chambers. Am I getting nobler, better, more helpful, more humble as I get older? Am I exhibiting the life that men take knowledge of as having been with Jesus? Or am I getting more self-assertive, more deliberately determined to have my own way? It is a great thing to tell yourself the truth. Oswald Chambers. It is my prayer today that the story of Joseph will bless you, and I want to thank you for joining us today on Journey to Daybreak. If you'd like a copy of my book called Journey to Daybreak, please go to my webpage, marthatoney.com. There will be all the information in order for you to get a copy of this book, and I believe it will be a blessing to you. Thank you for joining us, and until next time, keep walking in the light.